And we are recording on Monday, December 11th, 2023 at 10:21 a.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Kevin Barrett, who's been on here several times before. And as I was just telling him, I do got a plug. Guys, coffee, link is in the description. Fox and Sons Coffee, promo code Tommy, 15% off, as well as in the description, the Wellness Company, all your vitamins and supplements, promo code Tommy, 10% off. Yes, I am now a whore for the dollar. I'm no different than a pole dancer, but you know what? I shows got to start making money. But
Well, hey,
Dr.
you're hyping coffee. That's good
Hey, there we
stuff.
go. There we go. Yeah, I'm selling the coffee. You know, and is Dr. Barrett drinking Fox and Sons coffee? Legally, I can't say yes because he's not, but
If I could get it
you,
in Morocco, I would be.
you can pretend he is, right? Because it's all coffee, right? So, but yeah, his website is at truthjihad.com. You can also find the link to his Substack is in the description. And your show is it False Flag Weekly News?
Yeah, and Truth Jihad Radio.
Okay, let me make sure. I'm gonna pull up False Flag Weekly News. Just put it in the description so people can find you. But yeah, you've been here several times before, and it's always a blast. And I've had on everyone and their mother to talk about Hamas, Israel, and I was texting my buddy Ahmed, and I was like, hey Ahmed, I was like, you're really the only person I can find that wants to kind of play the other position. Do you want to come on? And he was like, why don't you have on Dr. Barrett? And then I was like, well, you put me in touch with Dr. Barrett last year. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. And I like sent you an email right away. I was like, will you please come on the show? So, if you could real quick, Dr. Barrett, so I'll shut up. Could you please introduce yourself and then we'll just jump on into it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, what am I? I'm a literature guy, actually, Tommy. I mean, I screwed around in college for a while. I got a BA in journalism back in 1981 from the University of Wisconsin, where it was real interesting that the higher ups at the local campus left-wing paper were all Jewish, and I got along real well with them. And anyway, so after that, I discovered that as I wanted to be a journalist, the kind of journalism I liked, Tom Wolfe and Hunter Thompson and people like that with interesting writing styles, were really doing literature more than journalism. And so I went back to school for literature, and I ended up collecting four advanced degrees in literature, doing English, French, African, and finally my PhD, which is African slash Arabic. So anyway, I got derailed from that literature career, both because my poetry and fiction isn't very good, but also because just as I was about to become a professor of, Arabic and Sufi studies and humanities, suddenly this 9/11 thing kind of blew up around me. And, 2003, I woke up and recognized how obvious it was that 9/11 had been a false flag. And once I started talking about that and doing activism, I had some success. And then in 2006, the mainstream media people came after me, the politicians, up to and including Lynn Cheney, who is much smarter than her husband, Dick Cheney. She runs this thought police outfit, ACTA, or she did then. It's dedicated to policing the academy. And so they came after me and witch hunted me at the University of Wisconsin. And I fought back. I was all over Fox News and the New York Times and stuff for 6 months, which is pretty good for 15 minutes of fame. And that made me permanently unemployable in the American Academy. So I couldn't teach medieval Sufi studies in Arabic anymore. So I've been trying to make the bad guys wish that they'd left me alone so I could be teaching Sufi studies right now. I've been pushing back ever since.
And that's kind of the only way to go about it is if they censor you, shut you down. That's always been my logic. It's just like I want them to wish they just let me run. Just like I'm gonna quintuple down on what it is. And actually, I think probably my favorite episode you and I did was the My Hop versus Lie Hop, Make It Happen on Purpose versus Let It Happen on Purpose 9/11 episode. And that's probably one of my all-time favorite episodes, just because any episode that really makes me drop or at least challenge my ego, I like those. I was at the gym this morning and I was doing push-ups and I was working out, and I'm always, whenever you start to get close to that pain barrier, you always, I don't want to do it, but it was just I've worked out every day for 20 years, and but just every once in a while the little flash of insight pops in, and it was like, the more this hurts, the better I'm going to feel after this. I'm more awake. The endorphins are rushing. I'm even on a cloudy December day. My mood is up. and I try to remember that with podcasts. Is whenever I start to feel that little like, you're getting close to something, my worldview, it's getting that's good, and it's move through that and move towards it, and you'll be a better interviewer for it, and I think a better person. And that's what, not to just kiss your ass, but that's what I really appreciate of our last episode is my hop and lie hop. But
Yeah, that
to
was fun.
that was it was a blast, man. Um, to pivot from there, can you explain the October 7th attacks between Hamas and Israel, and I guess the resulting counterattack? I don't know if that's the correct terminology, and why it was either inevitable, why it was not good, why it was good. Is it the only possible response? Is it, what is it? How do I, can you just really take it away?
Well, yeah, it's obviously a painful situation, especially for Palestinians. Palestinians have been subjected to a slow motion genocide. And the pump for that genocide got primed in the first half of the 20th century, and then the genocide has been executed ever since. And the Palestinian people have, been heroically pushing back against this genocide, and genocide committed really by the world's worst people. The Nazis were not the world's worst people. The Zionists are the world's worst people. They are psychopaths, criminals. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but let's be quantitative and accurate and scientific here. Lobosewski's book, Political Ponerology, was researched and written in Poland. Lobosewski is a psychiatrist who studied psychopathy and how psychopaths had spread at the top of the communist government. And he discovered that on psychopathy tests, that Jews do about twice as many Jewish psychopaths per capita as non-Jews. Now so obviously not all Jews are psychopaths. Like
Right.
2% of non-Jews, 4% of Jews in Poland. I mean, it's probably different in different places. Um, However, we should remember that psychopathy it's a spectrum. So they just do this arbitrary cutoff. If you score in the top, at a certain level, then you get to be called a psychopath. But it's a spectrum that runs from very saintly or very sensitive and altruistic saintly people at the extreme anti-psychopath end to the complete gangster types at the ultra
Mm-hmm.
psychopath end. And so what those tests showed, according to Lobosewski anyway, is that Jews on the average are about twice as psychopathic as non-Jews. Now, still, that means only 4%. 1 in 25
Sure.
Jews actually tests out as a psychopath, according to Lobosewski. And this is a Polish population where Netanyahu came from. So I don't know how this would apply to other places. But that I think that issue of individual psychopathy is relevant because it infects the collectivity. And the collectivity of tribal Jews, let's face it, has behaved psychopathically and against their host populations throughout all of history. Not all times in all places, but a lot of times in a lot of places, enough to get them kicked out of somewhere between many, many dozens, many hundreds, and according to at least one count, more than 1,000 places. And that negative, pernicious tendency in the Jewish community, which is based on these religious teachings that are all about absolutely despising, hating, and robbing, killing, and exploiting non-Jews. That this is built into the religion to a certain extent. Now, not every interpretation of the religion takes this and runs with it all the way, but it keeps popping up and causing trouble. So when this particular people from this background ended up deciding to cross the seas and commit genocide to exterminate the people of the Holy Land and create their so-called Jewish state there, naturally, this led to a whole lot of cruelty, viciousness, and just abominable behavior. And yeah, you could say it's part and parcel of Western settler colonialism, and that some, the British in Rhodesia and Kenya and the French in Algeria, the Afrikaners in South Africa, they weren't always that much better all the time. That may be partly true, but it's still nonetheless true that I think the overall behavior of the Zionists has been even worse, even more psychopathic than those other settler colonialists. And what's worse, it's still going on today. Everywhere else, they recognized that they were wrong and went home. They said it wasn't right for us to cross the Mediterranean and steal Algeria from the local people and say that Algeria was part of France. We were wrong. We made a mistake. We lost the war. We're going home. Likewise in South Africa. Okay, we'll accept that we were wrong. We shouldn't have done this apartheid white superiority state, and they gave up. The British went home from Kenya and ultimately Rhodesia. Sometimes it took wars, but still in occupied Palestine, these tribal psychopathic Jews are still there committing genocide, and the genocide is getting worse and worse every single day. And I'm watching hundreds of women and children being slaughtered every day, dying slowly beneath the rubble of what used to be their homes, their schools, and their hospitals. And we're not supposed to talk about it because anybody who notices the evils that the Jews are doing right now and have done in so many times and places throughout history is a nasty, racist, evil anti-Semite and has to be shut up. Well, I'm getting tired of that, and I'm not going to shut up about it.
Are they able to do this going along this line of thought because of the backing of the United States, the giant, the big, if you want to, the big dumb brother that has all the guns and aircraft carriers? Are they able to do it because of that?
Absolutely.
Just
And the
in
reason
terms of
they're able
currently, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. The reason they're able to do it because of the United States is because psychopathically tribal Jews have taken over the United States. Let's be honest and straightforward about this. Protestants, WASPs, ran the United States or dominated the United States through most of its history. But since World War II, and especially since the Zionist coup d'etat in 1963, when Israel murdered President Kennedy and then murdered his brother a few years later, and then even more so since the Zionist coup d'etat of September 11th, 2001, when Israel blew up the World Trade Center and murdered 3,000 people to blame it on their enemies and hijacked the American military to go beat up on their enemies. Ever since that transition has happened post World War II, WASPs no longer run the United States. Jews run the United States. Not just all Jews. Most Jews are just pretty much normal people. The most psychopathic, ultra-tribal Zionist Jews are the ones who run the United States. Some call them the neocons. But at this point, the establishment in the United States is pretty much neocon. The liberal side of the so-called establishment, which is dominated by wealthy, powerful Jewish people, is basically psychopathic neoconservative in orientation. And neoconservatism, of course, is a philosophy that's based on psychopathy. It basically says the happy person is the psychopath. The happy person is the one who tries to look good on the outside to have a good reputation in the community, but is actually a vicious, selfish gangster who will stop at nothing to satisfy his desires on the inside. So those are the people who are running the United States right now. So it's not like the United States is the big dumb goy brother who's letting the evil psychopaths in occupied Palestine commit genocide. The United States has been taken over by the same evil psychopaths. The United States is just as much occupied territory as Palestine is.
Interesting. I think that's maybe a better way to word it. Is I was in my mind, I was just thinking of South Park. There's like the small smart genius, but he's like crippled, and then he has a big brother, Mimsy, and he's just like he's a huge bully. But yeah, no, have you ever read The Ghost by Jefferson Morley about James Jesus Angleton?
I
Um
haven't read that yet. I should. I've read a fair bit about Angleton, but I never actually read that book.
it's an incredible, I've had him on here, he's a cool guy. But the book about James Jesus Angleton goes into it towards the end about how Angleton may have, as the head of counterintelligence, he if he lets something slide, there's no one above him to catch it. So he puts it forward pretty well that he aided in the confiscation and I guess exfiltration of nuclear material, and I want to say a nuclear weapon in the 60s to Israel, because apparently he was a devout Zionist, and it kind of goes on to say that Angleton thought Kennedy was a direct threat to the United States and that he wasn't strong during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then Morley kind of tiptoes along at the end. He lets you know that when he died, there was I think a permanent flame, one of those permanent memorials was made by the top guys at Mossad in Israel, which is kind of a crazy fact. And he kind of plays along those same things that, you know, was this was this made possible because Angleton believed that Israel was more tough on enemies, and it would play directly along into a 1963 coup followed by a 2001 coup. I mean, the idea that I think everyone accepts that there was a coup in 63 and 2001. It's not much farther to say, all right, well, who did it? Why did they do it? What do they control? And man, furthermore, to just, keep hitting down on it, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say it's also, if it's not direct infiltration and taking over, you could argue that it is something along the lines of Epstein's Island. How do you, it's always good to have allies, right? Hey, if they attack me, you're going to come get me, right? Yeah, bro, I got you. That doesn't really mean anything once the war starts. If a country just says, I'm not backing you up, like what if I was your ally? And Dr. Barrett's like, Tommy, if these guys come start fighting me in Morocco, you're gonna get on a flight. I'm like, yeah, bro, I got you. If when push comes to shove and they start throwing punches, I go, hey, Doc, holidays, I'm with the parents. Sorry. You go, oh shit, I'm by myself. Versus maybe you have video of me sleeping with a child. Yeah, I'm probably gonna get on that plane, right? And I think there's a lot to maybe lead towards that. But to kind of shift from all of that to October 7th. And this is what always makes my eyebrows kind of go up. I don't know anything about this guy. I just know he's almost like a caricature conservative, Charlie Kirk. He's got like a big head and a small face. He's like met with Trump. He heads up Turning Point USA, a huge kind of like conservative think tank for you. I don't know anything about him. Maybe he's a good guy. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I don't care. But he is like a caricature conservative. It's the inverse of the orange man bad. It's everything Biden does bad, blah, blah, blah. On October 8th, he went on a show and explained very succinctly why he thinks there was a stand down order and this was allowed to happen for Netanyahu to consolidate power. Which to me is the most batshit thing. That'd be like if Biden came out and was like, denounced communism. People would be like, that ain't nothing, right? Can you maybe speak on that? I know I've been rambling for a minute. Could you maybe speak on that? Do you think that there was a stand down? And I know that this is kind of a microcosm as opposed to looking at from 48 to present, but to just zoom it in for the more recent events. Do you think it was a stand down order?
Well, I've been arguing about this since it happened, since October 8th. And I think that, my original sense was probably not, because the way it unfolded, it seems to me that this is not advantageous for Israel and its future, and indeed for Netanyahu personally. So that was my first impression. This, what happened on October 7th was really a demonstration that Israel can be beaten. Remember, Israel is surrounded by, 500 million people in the region that have no use for it, and 2 billion Muslims who are not going to put up with this ongoing genocidal desecration of their holy land. And at some point, the world's 3 billion Christians might wake up too. At this point, the Palestinian ones and a few of the Eastern ones have. But in any case, this demonstration of Israel's vulnerability on October 7th really didn't make them look good. And then the fact that Hamas was able to capture all those people and take 250 plus hostages in order to try to get the release of the 10,000 hostages being held by Israel was also something that we know that the Israelis don't like. They don't want to have hostages creating political problems for them. And then right before the October 7th Al-Aqsa storm operation, Israel had been poised for a regional breakthrough. They were getting close to normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. And that could really change their prospects in the region from fairly bleak to a little better than that, if they could get the Gulf dictatorships to all fully normalize relations with them. And that would really make their ability to deal with the Palestinians on their terms kind of a fait accompli. So they were in a good position prior to October 7th. And I think they're in a much shakier position since then. So my initial impression was that this looks more like a big Palestinian success than a Zionist false flag. Another aspect to this to remember is that quite often with false flag operations, whoever they're blaming it on is really just a setup, a patsy, not really anybody of significance. For instance, with Lee Harvey Oswald, the patsy for the JFK assassination, he wasn't really much of a communist threat.
No.
But he was, cast as this communist so they could make him out to be part of this communist threat if they ever had to blame that assassination on the communists. And they used that as a kind of a weapon to keep
Hmm.
people like Earl Warren in line. And probably Angleton was the one behind that, by the way. In any
Yeah.
case, so Patsy, like Al Qaeda, the Patsy for 9/11, isn't really a fully independent, capable organization, and it never was. It was founded by the CIA as the database
Hmm.
of Mujahideen fighters working for the United States in Afghanistan. And then when
Mohammed
bin Laden
Brzezinski.
pretended to turn against the United States after the real, the best leader had been assassinated, from that point on, pretty much everything Al Qaeda did was not helpful to the movement for global Islamic liberation, restoring the caliphate, all that sort of thing. Instead, it was helpful to the enemies of that project. And indeed, the Arab world's most celebrated commentator, Mohammed Hakel, went on Al Jazeera shortly after 9/11 and said, "This is ridiculous. Of course, this, Al Qaeda couldn't possibly do anything like this." He said, "When I was part of the Egyptian government, we had Al Qaeda covered. We had them totally infiltrated. We heard them every time they went to the bathroom. And it wasn't just us, the Israelis and the
Hmm.
Saudis and the Americans. Everybody had it. Al Qaeda is just a cat's paw for intelligence agencies. So anyway, Al Qaeda was not a real force. They were a fake. There was no there. And that attack on 9/11 did not benefit freedom-seeking Muslims in any
No.
way. It benefited their enemies, especially the Zionists, and that's what Bin Laden said. Bin Laden came out, and three times in September and October of 2001, he kept reiterating that he had nothing to do with it. He didn't know who did it, but he assumed that it was probably domestic forces in the United States, namely the Zionists. Right? So that Bin Laden himself said that. So that was a very different situation from October 7th.
Hmm.
Hamas, yes, it got some help from Israel when it was created for a
Hmm.
couple of years in the late 1980s, but it quickly spun out of control and became their worst nightmare. Now, yes, certain forces in the Israeli government have probably seen to it that they've tried to, keep Hamas active up to a certain level as a counterweight to the Palestinian Authority and to international pressure to go along with a two-state solution. So, yeah, elements such as Netanyahu in the Israeli government probably have been willing to sort of work with Qatar as Qatar helps bring in funding for Hamas. Hamas has gotten support from all kinds of quarters throughout the entire region because everybody supports them. And this is the other difference, right? No more than 15% of Muslims around the world ever supported Al Qaeda, despite the wonderful speeches that bin Laden made. Why? Because number one, Muslims don't approve of harming civilians, and Al Qaeda had a reputation for maybe not being too scrupulous about that. That was the biggest reason. But also, Muslims could see that this was not an effective, authentic Islamic liberation organization. And then with ISIS, it was even more so. I mean, really nobody in the Muslim world, except for some kind of really gullible teenagers who get excited about what they are getting brainwashed by on social media, ever liked ISIS. So Muslims have unanimously hate ISIS pretty much, and yet Hamas, Muslims unanimously love Hamas. Everybody supports and loves Hamas, and everybody's cheering for them and has been for a long time because they're an authentic liberation organization. And the fact that they got a little help from Israel at the beginning and may have gotten, a little facilitation of getting some money to them from certain forces of the Israeli government at certain times since then has nothing to do with the overall picture. The overall picture is that Hamas is Israel's worst nightmare because they are essentially Islamic resistance to Zionism. And I think when Zionism is ultimately taken down, which it will be probably the world's 2 billion Muslims who will be the main force doing it. And they'll be doing it as an Islamic thing because Islam has administered that Holy Land on behalf of others, including Christians and Jews, pretty much ever since Islam existed. There have been a couple of brief and very bloody crusader interludes, but basically that Holy Land has been administered by Muslims ever since Islam began. And Muslims are never, ever going to allow it to be genocided and become a Jewish state. I guarantee you that if among the 2 billion Muslims on earth, if it came to that, somebody would figure out how to create a WMD with no
Hmm.
return address and make sure that that just made Jews, made it impossible for Jews to inhabit and run that genocided state that they're in. It's just not going to happen. So anyway, Hamas is this idea. The idea is Islamic resistance to Zionism, and all 2 billion Muslims in the world agree with that idea, whether even if a few of them aren't courageous enough to say so.
Mm.
So all of this means that October 7th was not some kind of false flag like 9/11 or like, Oswald shooting at JFK or Sirhan, the Palestinian patsy being
Hmm.
brainwashed by a Jewish hypnotherapist to shoot RFK Jr. before he became president and reopen the can of worms. It's not that. It's a real Islamic liberation organization striking a very successful blow against the Zionists. Now, is it possible that some element in Israel facilitated it? Yes, that's possible. It's I used to think it was very unlikely, and now I don't know. I'm not sure it was so unlikely given all of the news that's come out about the foreknowledge, the put options, and so on and so forth.
Mm.
Apparently, Israel's government had the detailed plan that Hamas actually followed on October 7th. They had that plan a year in advance. This was sitting on the shelf for Hamas. So they had that a year. That plan circulated at the highest levels of the Israeli government, according to Ronan Bergman, anyway. And supposedly they thought it was an aspirational plan that Hamas was not in a position to actually execute. But it's also possible that some elements in Israel underestimated Hamas and hoped that something would happen, but maybe not this big. And once it happened so big in such a big and successful way, as Hamas grabbed all of these hostages, if the Zionists had not declared mass Hannibal, and what that means, the Hannibal Directive is the Zionist uh, strategy that if there's ever a hostage situation where enemies of Israel are taking hostages, the Israelis just kill everybody. They kill the hostages and the hostage takers because they don't want to allow their people to be taken hostage
Mm.
because that becomes a huge political liability. So on October 7th, Israel actually declared, quote unquote, mass Hannibal. And that means massively slaughter both Israeli hostages and their Hamas hostage takers. And so that's what happened. Apparently, Hamas was so successful, they would have come back to Gaza with 5, 6, 700 or more hostages if
Mm.
Israel had not declared mass Hannibal and come in with helicopter gunships, tanks, and heavy artillery and just slaughtered everybody in sight. Virtually all of the Israeli civilian casualties on October 7th were killed by Israel itself. Now, I don't think Israel or anybody in the Israeli government wanted it to play out that way. Maybe they're crazy, completely even more insane than I think they are. But my sense is that if anybody in Israel was complicit in letting it happen, they didn't intend it to happen in such a huge way and in such an unfortunate way for them. Now they're stuck. They're losing on the ground in Gaza. All
Mm.
they can do is mass slaughter civilians with no strategic purpose to it. They can dream about emptying Gaza of its inhabitants, but that's pretty unlikely to happen. And if it did happen, it would be the death warrant of the Jewish state because its legitimacy would be completely destroyed forever. So they're in such terrible shape, and Netanyahu's in such terrible shape politically. The minute this war ends, he's toast, very likely heading for prison. That it makes it really hard for me to believe that this is the way the Zionists wanted it all to happen.
Excuse me. Um, when I mean stand, and I need to be very clear. I know compared to something like 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination, I admittedly know very, very little about this. So just take it all with a grain of salt. To put it in, I guess, terminology of our past episodes, it seems more like a lie hop as opposed to, I don't think that Israel fomented it, but yeah, maybe you versus whereas, in the episode, you pretty much, proved to me that it was my hop that 9/11 was made to happen by domestic forces as opposed to letting it happen. This one seems more like lie hop in that a little messier. It's not quite doesn't fit in the stencil, But let's say you are just let's go with this postulation. Let's say you are total psychopath. Let's say you're trying to consolidate power. You would look at it and you would want reason to go in and pummel your enemies. Now, did it play out the way they wanted to? No, but in terms of a lie hop situation, it kind of worked out. You have a lot of people who got to remember you're very tuned into this. I'm less tuned into it than you are, but I'm probably more tuned in than the average person just because I get to do the podcast. Most people, it's just the oh man, look what they did. Of course they're going to go in and pound them. It's very quick, right? It's well he hit him, so yeah, he punched him back. No one really goes into the whole depth of what's going on. That's why to me it seems a little more like lie hop in that if we're going to postulate that Israel, Mossad, Unit 8200, if they're able to infiltrate and control something as powerful as the United States, we then have to walk that logic out and say they are able to infiltrate and surveil what's going on immediately around them. And that doesn't mean that the guys coming over on the paragliders were Mossad agents. I don't mean that so much as you may be looking at it and you're going like, man, they come over here, you know, let them wreak havoc, let them post it on social media. Even if for a short while, you're gonna have the general backing of everyone, at the very least emotionally. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's moral or ethic. None of that. I'm just looking at it to become the cold psychopath. That's how I would look at it. I would go, yeah, let it happen. Let them. You and I don't look at it that way because we're normal human beings. We go,
Right, right. But
don't do that.
what's the strategy though? Okay, so yeah, they're psychopaths. They'll do whatever it takes to
Sure.
pursue their strategy. But where are they trying to take this?
Further, just complete demolition of Gaza. We got to go get them once and for all. We got to mind you, I'm not married to this idea, but just throwing it out there. Yeah, it would just do it, push it all the way to the edge, all settlements, completely take it over, remove Gaza entirely.
Yeah, clearly they would like
Just
to do that.
yeah,
But whether they were sure enough that they could get away with that, that it would be worth puncturing their aura of invincibility
sure.
and go creating the problems for themselves that they've created, blowing up their deal with the Saudis,
Hmm.
and creating a huge problem around the world for their image and their legitimacy. To me, that
It's a good point.
trying to trying to flatten Gaza, which would probably be a Pyrrhic victory because, as I said, that the more they kill the civilians in front of the cameras, the more their legitimacy suffers,
Hmm.
and the more that billions of people around the world vow to they're going to do whatever it takes to get
Sure.
revenge and to eliminate this psychopathic Zionist entity, come hell or high water. If we have to educate our children for 100 generations to do it, we will. But I don't think it's going to take nearly that long. And so, yeah, it just doesn't seem like a good strategic move to me. But maybe they see something. I don't. It would make sense if there were still an extreme sort of demographic threat, and if
Hmm.
they didn't have a better way to deal with their issues. But the demographic threat to Israel is not as bad as it appeared that it was going to be 10, 20 years ago. And so I don't know. I just can't. I maybe they see something I don't, but uh, I know that the one area where I can imagine that somebody at the higher echelons of the Israeli decision making apparatus might want this to be the big ethnic cleansing and the big Mideast war is if they determined that they're really in a bad spot vis-a-vis Iran and the axis of resistance. And that's clearly their biggest worry. And so it is conceivable that they might be trying to stir up that big Middle East war so they can have it while they think that they still have a chance of winning. For instance, while the United States is still a global superpower and can be relied upon to be on their side when push comes to shove with Iran, yeah, maybe they're that pessimistic. Maybe they read the tea leaves and said, we're really, we're facing doom here. The Iranians are getting stronger all the time. They're going to have, their drone fleet is the wonder of the world. They're selling their cheap drones to the Russians, who are using them to extremely powerful effect against NATO weaponry. The Iranians are putting rockets into space all over the place. If they don't have a nuclear program, it's really because they don't want one. But if they ever want one, they've got it. And who knows what other kinds of weapons they may be developing too. They're so much bigger than Israel is, and they're so, they're completely dedicated to the cause of Palestinian resistance, as is everybody else in the region. The Iranian government has the guts to say so and to pursue that policy openly. That maybe that's so frightening to them that the Zionists said, let's go ahead and have the big war while we still have a chance. I mean, that's really the only way I can imagine that they would have wanted this kind of situation where they, got hit in such a terrible, unpleasant way for them, and then that led them to apparently, be on this path right now towards to futility. It looks to me like it's it's whatever they do, it's futile. But maybe they were so desperate that they can imagine that having some kind of out, and maybe what they really want is that big regional war, and they're hoping that the U.S. is still strong enough to take out Iran for them. That's all I can really imagine that a strategist at the high levels in Israel could be thinking if such a strategist had wanted anything like October 7th.
Almost like a micro Thucydides trap, where you have to fight the upcoming power. I don't know, it might be like they might be looking at it as if it's a closing window. And
Yes.
right, it's well, in terms of it not working, I'm with you. It's not a very good false flag to allow happen, but maybe we
Why
got
not
to
just sink a ship?
exactly,
Why not
yeah.
just have a Gulf of Tonkin
Why not just hit
incident
the
in the,
USS Liberty?
you know,
Yeah,
a Persian Gulf of Tonkin incident?
why not just mow down an American ship? It worked before. Um,
Yeah.
but if we were to look at it, we could maybe look at it like a CEO that seemingly not seemingly does tank a company. When you go, what the fuck was that? Why'd they take down Tommy Industries? And you go, no, yeah, no, Tommy Industries tanked, but that guy left with a $400 million golden parachute. He's fine. He's a psychopath. He fucked over everyone else, but he's fine. This could be something like a Netanyahu or a small group of I guess real psychopaths at the top. They might go, yeah, it's sloppy, it's not perfect, but they're looking at it in terms of them personally. They're not looking at the empire. They're going, how do we not get fucked? How do we not end in jail? How do we whatever? In which case, it would make sense. Again, I'm not married to that idea, and I don't care, but it seems like that. And then, but conversely, to maybe go towards it was not a lie hop situation. I would say maybe it seems like the entire global temperature is kind of the frequencies going up. Ukraine, Taiwan might just be like strike while the iron's hot. The world hegemon powers can only be stretched so thin. Could very well be that. I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem. It doesn't seem like a good false flag if it were to be one. And I think you're correct on that. Kind of. You said
Well,
it.
if
Sorry.
it's a lie hop, Tommy, when we
Sure.
taking it back to our conversation about lie
Sure.
hop, the whole reason 9/11 couldn't have been a lie hop is that it never would have happened if it had just been letting them. There's no
Mm,
way that these
yeah.
particular characters were ever going to succeed in, successfully pulling off the first successful hijackings in decades, and then manage to hit targets.
Yeah.
And if they hit the targets are going to blow up. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah.
So the thing about a lie hop is, you have to make sure that whoever you're letting do the thing that you want to happen actually
It's got to
does that
happen. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like with the Japanese at Pearl Harbor,
Hmm.
right? So, uh, and you can imagine, I suppose, a lie hop gone wrong. Like, let's imagine that, obviously this wouldn't happen, but let's just imagine that like Bush and Cheney and the high command of the United States in, say, 2001 saw that there was some kind of Arab plan to, hijack some planes and fly them into some buildings. And let's just imagine that they said, "Oh, let's do a lie hop. Let's
Mm.
just make sure we're going to make absolutely sure that these guys actually get on those planes and have a chance of hijacking them, fly them into some buildings, and then we'll have our pretext for what we want to do over in the Middle East." So they just blind themselves and they don't bother to control it in any way, shape, or form. Well, imagine then that one of these hijackings, as it turns out, these hijackers are way better than
Mm.
they realized, and they fly plane. They manage to get nuclear weapons on the planes,
Yeah.
and they fly into the Pentagon with a nuclear weapon that blows up the Pentagon. Pentagon's gone, Rumsfeld's gone, all the top brass is gone, the whole military is gone. They fly one, maybe into Congress, and boom, that's gone too. They fly one into New York, boom, Manhattan's gone.
Mm.
And now you've got, some Arabs with no state affiliation, so there's nobody to retaliate against. And they just totally destroy the United
Gotcha.
States, and there's no more military capacity. That would be a really screwed up LIHOP, right? And so, to me, Alexa Storm would be sort of like that. Like, if
Yeah.
they wanted some provocation, I wouldn't think that they would want 250 hostages being taken. And I wouldn't think that they would want like 700 being taken if they don't come in and kill them all.
Mm.
Um, I wouldn't think. But again, I guess we're not at that pay grade to have all of that closely held information these guys have. But then another point, though, Tommy, is you mentioned like some faction in Israel is could be trying to save itself, Netanyahu and his friends. However, Ron Unz has pointed out, and I think accurately, that if it were a factional deal like that, it'd be really tough to do a stand down. Like if your faction is going to do the stand down, and the Netanyahu faction hates the dominant Mossad faction, so they're always fighting each other.
I didn't
Okay,
know that.
so if the Netanyahu faction is going to try to stand down and let Hamas do a big attack, the other Mossad faction, which is probably savvier, and certainly has its hands on the intelligence machinery probably more than the other faction, why would they let that go? Right? I mean, they could use that to hang Netanyahu, and that's what they've been trying to do. So the problem is when if you have factions vying with each other, and one of them is going to do a LIHOP, the other faction
Would
has,
blackmail them.
yeah, and they're going to use that to just grab power, right?
Mm.
The faction doing the LIHOP is committing treason. The other faction can bust them and hang them for treason if it wants to, and that would be a heck of a risk.
And then they could consolidate power on their own, whoever's hanging them for treason.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
if Netanyahu gave an order, let's stand down and let
sure.
Hamas do this attack. His enemies in Mossad, who can't stand Netanyahu, seems that way anyway. Why wouldn't they just like record that and and hang Netanyahu and put their own guy in power?
Hmm. No, that's a yeah. The LIHOP doesn't really. The only thing I could think of is it's again in my limited knowledge of this. It seems to be on a lesser scale as opposed to the hypothesis of hey, let's let them do this, and it turns out to be nukes, take out Pentagon, New York, DC. This,
Oops.
yeah, oops, yeah. This one seems smaller in that I don't know, maybe they had I don't know. I guess I'm just looking at it more. It might just be my own, I guess, childish mind. I'm looking at it. I'm like, paragliders smaller than planes. It seems less intense. It might have been, or it seems like it could just been a bloody nose to Israel. It might have just been that. And as you and I have both demonstrated, we don't shy away from the idea of false flags. But yeah, I don't really see it being a stand down. The more that you're kind of talking about it, seems like they just caught one to the chin. Sometimes you just get your ass kicked. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean that was my first impression. And now again, there's all of these revelations about put options and such, right? Somebody knew it was coming
Hmm.
and bet on the Israeli stock market. So that's pretty. Yeah,
Yeah.
between that and then these Bergman articles about the foreknowledge, the detailed foreknowledge. I'm no longer writing off people who think it was a false flag. Early on, it looked like the people who were screaming false flag right away. A lot of them are not that knowledgeable about the region, and they didn't really understand kind of the upshot of this, and so it was easy to dismiss them. But with this new information that's come out since then, and the fact that Israel has gotten away with a lot more genocide than I would have thought that they could. But add those two things together, and these people who think, well, maybe the crazies in Israel did set this up as a way to exterminate the Palestinians and finish the job that they didn't finish in 1948. That's I can't completely dismiss that anymore. I still don't think it probably didn't happen that way. But I don't think the people who are suggesting that are crazy.
Yeah, I'm not 1,000% convinced in either way. In that there's always interest and there always it seems to but it's also sometimes you just roll with the punches and an event happens and you go, how can we capitalize on it? Doesn't necessarily mean we're doing this episode right now. Does it mean that Tommy was behind October 7th so he could do it? No. But I see and I go, all right, interesting topic. Have on people for one side. Let's do an episode on the other side. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's all coordinated. Sometimes you just kind of work with what's going on. Less proven, and by less proven, I mean virtually zero evidence. I can't help but think that everything we're seeing in slow we'll look back on one day. Right? We don't think World War II, it's like 33, Hitler becomes chancellor, and then 45, we nuke Hiroshima. It's just bing bada boom. It's done. 33 and the 39 invasion. What 41, 42, Pearl Harbor, go in, Barbarossa, everyone, blah, blah, blah. Pacific and European theater, and then it's over. It's all neat and concise, beginning, end, history book, whatever. But you gotta remember, I mean, that's a 12-year period, 33 to 45. That's a big period. I can't help but think, and I've said this on a million shows before, that we're in the prelude to World War III, and we'll maybe one day look back on COVID as the beginning, then Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, Israel, Arab world, then China, Taiwan, and how it all slowly builds up to we're dividing the world between best case, a Cold War, a second Cold War, worst case, World War III. In which case, it all seems to, but that's also, was it pareidolia where you see faces where faces don't exist? Like when you look into a cloud or some, trees and you see do a lot of mushrooms, you'll see a face anywhere. This could also be that. I'm just trying to. I read so much, and I'm like, maybe I'm in my own psychosis. I'm like, it's World War III, it's happening, but
No. I think you're onto something, Tommy. I think actually you put it quite accurately. I mean, I think that's true. I think COVID was the first shot
oh
of
yeah,
World War III. It was the U.S. attack on China's economy.
oh
It
yeah, we did it.
succeeded
Yeah,
in
we did it. Yeah.
yeah, and it succeeded in slowing China's economic growth, which was its intention. And this war on Russia through Ukraine, that was, that's part of this 2014
Mm-hmm.
onward, U.S. Attempt to weaken Russia and prevent it from becoming a fully independent sovereign entity in Eurasia that will, between it and China and Iran, those three Eurasian powers are creating this nucleus of really a new way of organizing the world that will sideline the U.S. empire. U.S. empire will no longer be the solitary hegemon. Will no longer have that claim of being the top dog and
Mm.
ability to have the ability to dictate terms to the world, and then run the world through toilet paper dollars, right?
Yeah.
By putting the guns to everybody's head and take our toilet paper dollars or we'll blow you away, which has been our mo for quite a while now. So yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly what's happening. We're in World War III, and we'll hope it doesn't become even hotter than it already is. And let's hope that power in the world can get shifted and redistributed
Mm.
relatively peacefully, because that power is going to be shifted and redistributed one way or another. Right? The
Yeah.
U.S. came out of World War II with almost all the gold, most of the manufacturing base, dominated the world, and then its occupied vassals in Western Europe have been
Mm-hmm.
part of that empire, but now it's all changed. The rest of the world is caught up. The BRICS countries, especially
Mm-hmm.
led by China, these formerly undeveloped countries are now developed. The global economy the whole tide is shifted towards these outside of the U.S. empire countries, and the power in the world has to get redistributed. It'll either happen through war or it'll happen through diplomacy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's even let's look at 9/11. I mean, we look back, 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, that was still 18 months between 9/11 and Iraq. Obviously, we went into Afghanistan immediately. But even that, like you forget, like that's a year and a half. Like it's so easy to forget that these things take time. And the bigger the event, right? I mean, you build a house, it takes however many, weeks you put in the foundation and all that shit. A skyscraper, it takes a year and a half, 2 years to put in all the pilings and everything. It scales up. So if we're looking at World War III, I mean, what, 2019? I started my podcast 4 years ago tomorrow. That was also the first confirmed COVID case in the United States, not including the fact that, we invented it at UNC Chapel Hill, whatever. In terms of actual mainstream media, right? That's only 4 years. That's, if we're looking at World War II, that's 33 to 37. That's not even an invasion of Poland yet. Like, it takes time, and it could very well be this. And I think it's last, and I know I got to let you go, so we'll wrap it up. But somebody, I'm banned from Twitter, but somebody made a tweet that I thought was interesting, and it was 20 years ago. If you had even suggested that you were getting off the U.S. dollar, the petrodollar, you want to go to gold, you were expecting some freedom soon, right? And by freedom means we're going to invade and kill everyone. BRICS is now just fully out in the open without so much as a peep from the United States. Is the United States going quietly into the good night, or is it the guy that's real quiet and he's leaving to go get a gun? The guy that normally fights everyone at the bar. There's some movie where it's the guy leaves. He goes, you know what? I'm gonna go get it, and he just leaves, and everyone goes, oh shit, and they all, because they know he's coming back with a gun, and he does. I forget what movie. It might have been White Man Can't Jump. I don't remember. But it might be that everyone's talking about BRICS, and it's just all right, and then slowly but surely, it's like, and I'm not defending this. I'm not. I know I have the American flag behind me because I do love what it stands for, not what it's unfortunately become. But just to look at it, just remove all emotion, all attachment, and just look at it. COVID, Ukraine, we're drawing the battle lines. You're with us or against us. All of Europe is ramping up munitions. They're all standardizing munitions as of like June or July, I think, the first time in a long time. Now it's like, hey, it's not enough for Europe. Let's go to, we gotta awaken that old thing. The war on terror, Israel, Arabs, hey. And now we're also, let's get in everyone. China, Taiwan, innocent Taiwan, where all our, our semiconductors are fabricated, but big bag China. And make no mistake, when China finally does invade Taiwan, it will conveniently come out some information that has been deemed too important to national security that without a doubt, China released COVID. Even though 2 years ago that was considered racist, that will come out, and that will be the final punch card, and ding, 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 put the gloves in the center and do, 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 and the fight begins. And I hope it doesn't, because there's one way and one way only that ends, and it's with cobalt salted thermonuclear warheads turning the earth uninhabitable. But I can't put a gun to my head and this is what I think is going to happen. I don't want it to happen, but I couldn't look you in the eyes and lie to you, right? I think that's what's happening. And it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. And the best case is Cold War II and a very slow evolution to a multipolar world. I don't know. I know I'm just kind of ranting now. I'm just using you as my therapist, but that's what I think is going to happen, man.
Yeah, no, I don't really disagree with any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, well, people keep saying, you've been predicting the end of the U.S. empire, for years, the collapse of the dollar, when's that going to happen? And, I say, well, be patient. Rome wasn't sacked in a day. So, it's the empire is going to fall, but it's sort of tottering and takes a while, as you said. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get a few more podcasts in before it really hits the fan.
Hopefully, yeah, we'll get a couple more in there, and
inshallah,
yeah, we'll have them beamed out, and hopefully the sphere of electromagnetic communications keeps expanding through the galaxy. We'll be vaporized, but maybe the podcast will go on. So shout out to any alien race watching this. 11:15. I know you got more interviews because you are a wanted man. Dr. Barrett, thank you so much for your time. As always, thank you for challenging my beliefs. And above all else, man, thank you for your time. I always appreciate it.
Well, thanks. I always enjoy the conversations, Tommy.
Yes, sir. Dr. Barrett, thank you so much. Guys, please go into the description. Please go check out False Flag Weekly News. Please go check out all everything I said early on. I'm looking at it right now. All the links are in the description. Please go check them out. Give them your support. And till next time, thank you so much, Dr. Barrett. Guys, thank you so much for watching.